Welcome, YouTubers, to another episode in my Grammar Hero series. In this video, there's going to be 57 practice test questions that should closely mirror what you should expect to see in the mathematics knowledge subtest of both the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery, that is the ASVAB, as well as a pre-screening Internet Delivered Computer Adaptive Test, that is the PiCAT. On the actual ASVAB and PiCAT, you'll have 20 minutes to answer 16 questions. And likewise, you're not going to be permitted to use a calculator or a reference sheet. In order to get the most from this video, of course, you'll want to pause the video after I read a question, attempt to solve it on your own, and then resume playing the video to check your solution. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, I quickly want to mention this: do not pay for tutoring or access to online boot camps or mobile apps. Haven't evaluated many of them. I've noticed that many of them are just copying and pasting content from free resources and charging you a premium for that. And truth be told, the vast majority of you will pass this very simple test as long as you study for it diligently for about a week to a month. So, with all that finally being said, let's go ahead and get started with these 57 practice test questions. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says, what is 3b squared plus b squared added to b plus 4? So we're adding these two polynomials together. That looks like this. We have 3b squared plus b squared plus b plus 4. Now that we added these two polynomials together, we're going to simplify this expression by combining like terms. Again, a like term has the same letter variable raised to the same power. So here we have b raised to the second power. Here we have b raised to the second power. Again, technically there's a 1 in front of this b. And so if it's helpful, you can express that. But typically in math, you don't express 1 in front of letter variables. 3b squared plus 1b squared is 4b squared. Now that we've combined those like terms, cross them out. There is no corresponding like term for b, just so copy it down as is, cross it out. Likewise, there is no corresponding like term for 4, so just copy it down. So this is 4b squared plus b plus 4, which is answer choice B, ironically. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says if the area of a square is 400 square units, what is the length of its side? So for this one, all you have to know is how to find the area of a square. That formula is area of a square is equal to its side length squared. In this case, we know its area is 400 square units, so we'll plug that in. This becomes 400 equals s squared. So we're going to be solving for s because s equals the side length of the square. To get s by itself, we're going to take the square root of both sides. This crosses out here, leaving you with s over here. The square root of 400 is 20. So this one is the side length of the square is 20. This one is A. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says simplify 32 over 7. So 32 over 7 is an improper fraction because the numerator is bigger than the denominator. So we can convert this to mixed number, and to do that we use long division. We read this as 32 divided by 7. How many times does 7 go into 32 without going over? That's 4 times. 4 times 7 is 28. 32 minus 28 is 4. So we have enough information to write our mixed number. This 4 is going to be our whole number. This remainder of 4 is going to be our numerator. And this 7 is going to be our denominator. So this one is B, 4 and 4 sevenths. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says the absolute value of 13 minus 15 equals. So let's do this math. 13 minus 15 is negative 2. What is the absolute value of negative 2? That's just 2. Why is it 2? Because I know I'm going to get that question. Well, the absolute value of a number is its distance away from 0 without regard to its sign. So here's negative 2. How far away is negative 2 from 0? It's 1, 2 places away from negative 0. So again, that's absolute value. And this one is D. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says 1/2 plus 1/3 plus 1/4. So we're adding these three fractions together. And again, you can't use a calculator on this test. In order to add fractions, they all have to have the same or a common denominator. So what we're going to do is rewrite all three of these fractions with a common denominator so that we can add them, of course. 2, 3, and 4 all go into 12. So 12 is going to be our common denominator. To write 2 as 12, I have to multiply it by 6. I'm also going to do that to its numerator. To write 3 as 12, I have to multiply it by 4. I also have to do that to its numerator. And to write 4 as 12, I have to multiply it by 3. I'm also going to have to do that to its numerator. Again, when you add fractions, you keep your denominator the same. Uh, 6 plus 4 is 10, plus 3 is 13. All right, so we got the improper fraction 13 over 12. The next thing we have to do is convert this improper fraction to mixed number, and we could do that via long division. We could read this as 13 divided by 12. How many times does 12 go into 13 without going over? That's one time. 1 times 12 is 12. 13 minus 12 is 1. All right, we have enough to write our mixed number. This 1 is going to be our whole number. This remainder of 1 is going to be our numerator. And this 12 is going to be our denominator. So this one, as you can see, is a 1 and 1/12. This practice test question for the math knowledge subtest of the ASVAB and PiCAT says, which pairs of angles are equal in measurement? So the first thing I want to point out is that angles 1, 2, 3, and 4 share a vertex. Angles that are on opposite sides of a shared vertex are equal. So angles 1 and 4 are equal, 3 and 2 are equal. Down here, 5, 6, 7, and 8 share a vertex. So 7 and 6 are equal, 5 and 8 are equal. Additionally, you have to know the alternate interior angles theorem, which says if two parallel lines are cut by a transversal, then the alternate interior angles are also congruent, that is, equal to each other. So let's go through our answer choices one by one. 1 and 2. 1 and 2 form a straight line, therefore, they are supplementary. Angles 4 and 5. Well, as you can see, those are alternate interior angles, therefore, they are going to be equal. So this one is B. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says, what is the area of a circle that has a diameter of 4 units? Use 3.14 to approximate pi. So for the ASVAB and PiCAT, you have to know some basic formulas from geometry, including how to calculate the area of a circle. Area of a circle is pi r squared, where r is the radius, of course. In this case, we were given the diameter of the circle, so we also have to know that the diameter of a circle is always equal to twice its radius. That is d equals 2r. Since our diameter is 4, we can plug it in for d here. This is 4 equals 2r. Divide both sides by 2 now to get r by itself. 4 divided by 2 is 2. Now that we know r is 2, we can plug it in right here. And likewise, we were told to use 3.14 to approximate pi. So that's what we'll do there. This becomes 3.14 times 2 squared. 2 squared is the same thing as 2 times 2, which is 4. So this is 3.14 times 4. All right, let's do this math off to the side if you can't do it mentally. This is 3.14 times 4. We have to move this decimal in 3.14 two times to the right to rewrite this as 314 times 4, albeit with two decimals to move back into the left when we're done. 4 times 4 is 16, carry a 1. 1 times 4 is 4 plus 1 is 5. 3 times 4 is 12. Bring our two decimals back in. We can see that the area of our circle is 12.56 square units, which is answer choice C, of course. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says, what is the area of a parallelogram that has a base of x minus 1 and a height of 3x minus 2? So to find the area of a parallelogram, it's simply base times height. According to the problem, the base of our parallelogram is x minus 1, and its height is 3x minus 2. So we just have to multiply these things together to get our answer. Once we multiply them together, of course, we'll simplify our expression by combining like terms. So to get started, we're going to multiply x here and here. And after that, we're going to take negative 1, multiply it here and here. X times 3x is 3x squared. X times negative 2 is negative 2x. Negative 1 times 3x is negative 3x. -1 times -2, again, a negative times a negative is a positive, so that's positive 2. Let's combine our like terms, notably -2x and -3x. So this is 3x squared. -2x minus 3x is minus 5x plus 2. So this is 3x squared minus 5x plus 2, which is going to be answer choice D, of course. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says 6x plus 5y times 3x plus 2y equals. So in this case, you have to know how to multiply this out using the FOIL method. And that says you take this term right here, you multiply it here and here. You take this term and you multiply it here and here. And then you simplify this by combining like terms. So let's get started. 6x times 3x is going to be 18x squared. 6x times 2y is going to be 12xy. Uh, 5y times 3x is going to be 15xy. And then finally, 5y times 2y is going to be 10y squared. All right, let's go ahead and simplify this by combining like terms. We have 18x squared, 12xy, and 15xy are like terms. 12 plus 15 is going to be 27xy. And then finally, we have 10y squared. All right, so this is simplified as much as possible. These all start with 18x plus 27xy plus 27xy plus 10y squared. So this one is clearly B. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says, if one side of a hexagon is x plus 2, what is its perimeter? So here's a hexagon. As you can see, it's a six-sided figure, and all the sides are equal. If one side's x plus 2, then all these other sides are x plus 2. That said, how do you find the perimeter of a regular polygon, including a hexagon? You add up all of its sides. Instead of doing x plus 2, plus x plus 2 plus x plus 2 six times, we're going to do 6 times x plus 2. And again, we're just going to take this 6 and multiply it here and here. This becomes 6x plus 12. So the perimeter of a hexagon with one side being x plus 2 is 6x plus 12. Answer choice C in this case. This arithmetic reasoning practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says, if the ratio of the sides of two squares is 3 to 1, what is the ratio of their perimeters? So let's get started with the ratio of their sides. According to the problem, that's 3 to 1. So we can simply say that this side of this square is 3, this side of this square is 1. This gives us a ratio of their sides of 3 to 1. Now we have to find the ratio of their perimeters. And to answer this one, you have to know some properties of squares. Notably, in squares, all the sides are equal. So in other words, if this side's 1, all these other sides are 1. If this side's 3, all these other sides are, of course, 3. Now, how do you find the perimeter of any regular polygon, including a square? It's very simple. You add up all of its sides. So the perimeter of this square is 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 are 4. The perimeter of this square, again, we're just adding up all of its sides. 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3, that's going to be 12. What is the ratio of their perimeters? That's going to be 12 to 4. Of course, we can reduce this by a common factor of 4. 12 divided by 4 is 3. 4 divided by 4 is 1. So as you can see, the ratio of their perimeter is 3 to 1, which is the same thing as the ratio of their sides. So this one is D. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says simplify 160 over 240. So we're trying to simplify the fraction 160 over 240. The first thing we could do is cross out this pair of corresponding zeros, and this becomes 16 over 24. 16 and 24 have a common factor of 8, so we can reduce this by a common factor of 8. 16 divided by 8 is 2. 24 divided by 8 is 3. We can't reduce this any further, so our answer is going to be C, 2/3. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says if lines L and M are parallel, the value of x is. We have a transversal that is line N cutting across two parallel lines, and X and 60 degrees are same side interior angles. You have to know that same side interior angles always add up to 180 degrees. So X plus 60 have to equal 180 degrees. That is to say, X and 60 degrees are supplementary. To solve for X, all we do is subtract 60 from both sides. This crosses out, leaving you with 180 minus 60 is 120. So this one is B. X is 120 degrees. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says solve the inequality negative 3y is greater than or equal to 21 plus 6. So we have negative 3y greater than or equal to 21 plus 6. So to get started, we can combine 21 and 6. 21 and 6 is going to be 27. All right, so we're going to be solving this inequality for y. So the next thing we're going to do is divide both sides by negative 3. Now, whenever you multiply or divide across the inequality sign by a negative value, that's going to prompt you to change the direction of the sign. In this case, I divided across the inequality by a negative 3, so I'm going to change the direction of its sign. This crosses out, leaving you with y on this side. 27 divided by negative 3. A positive divided by a negative is going to be a negative. 27 divided by 3 is 9. So this is y is less than or equal to negative 9, which is going to be answer choice C. Again, remember, if you multiply or divide across the inequality sign by a negative value, that prompts you to change the direction of its sign. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says, which of the values of z would not satisfy the inequality 3 minus z greater than 7? So let's solve this inequality algebraically for z. We have 3 minus z greater than 7. To get started, we're going to get z by itself by subtracting 3 from both sides. This crosses out, leaving you with negative z on this side. Greater than 7 minus 3 is 4. Again, we're trying to find the values of z, not negative z. So to clear this negative in front of z, we're going to divide both sides of this inequality by negative 1. Now, as far as inequalities are concerned, you need to know this. Whenever you multiply or divide across the inequality sign by a negative value, that's going to prompt you to change the direction of the sign or flip it. In this case, I divided both sides by negative 1. So my next step is to flip the direction of the inequality sign. Again, a negative divided by a negative is a positive, so this just becomes positive z over here. 4 divided by negative 1 is going to be negative 4. Again, a positive divided by a negative is a negative. So let's solve this one visually. We're going to plot this on a line graph here. We're going to go to negative 4. So this is negative 3, negative 2, negative 1, negative 5, negative 6, negative 7, and so on and so forth. We're going to go to negative 4, which is right here. Since this is less than, we're going to put an open circle above negative 4 so as not to include negative 4 in our solution. And z is all the values that are less than negative 4. So that's going to be negative 5, negative 6, and negative 7, and so on and so forth. So we put an arrow above all those values to show that they're included in our solution. So negative 10 works, negative 6 works, and negative 5 works. Negative 3 is not included in our solution set. So the correct answer to this one is D. Negative 3 does not satisfy this inequality. You can see that visually down here, but if you want to see it algebraically, let's go ahead and see what that looks like. We have 3 minus z greater than 7, and we're saying in this case, z is negative 3. So let's plug in negative 3 for z. This becomes 3 minus negative 3 greater than 7. Minus minus becomes plus. 3 plus 3 is 6. Is 6 greater than 7? It is not. So therefore, we know negative 3 does not satisfy this inequality. Again, we saw it visually down here, and we just saw it algebraically over here. So that is that one. Math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says 12 is 15% of what number? So we're going to translate this statement into an equation that we'll then solve. 12 Is in math is equal, 12 equals 15% as a decimal is 0.15, of is multiply. What number? That number is unknown, so call it x. So we're going to be solving this one-step equation for x by dividing both sides by 0.15. Let's cross this out, leaving you with x over here. What is 12 divided by 0.15? Well, you can't do long division with the decimal outside the division bar, so you have to move this decimal 2 times to make that 15. And you're going to move this decimal after 12 a corresponding number of times, that is 1, 2. So this becomes 1200 divided by 15. And you know that has to be a pretty big number, right? Can't be 1.8. 15 times 1.8 is going to be less than 30. This is going to be a very small number. So we know that this is either 18 or 80. And if you can't figure that out, you can quickly do it off to the side. You can do 15 times 18. 5 times 8 is 40. So bring down a 0, carry a 4. 8 times 1 is 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Add a 0 placeholder. 1 times 5 is 5. 1 times 1 is 1. You can see that this is only going to be 270, which is too small. So 15 times 80 is exactly 1200. And you don't have to work that out with no remainder. So this one is going to be D80. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says simplify the square root of 81 x to the fourth y to the sixth. So you should know that the square root of 81 is 9. All these answer choices that don't start with 9 therefore are incorrect. Now let's rewrite this square root using an exponent, and that's going to make simplifying x to the fourth and y to the sixth much easier. So again, we're going to write this as 81 x to the fourth, y to the sixth, all raised to the 1/2 power. When you raise something to the 1/2 power, that means you take the square root of it. Again, the square root of 81 is 9. So we did that already. Now we can use the power rule for exponents to quickly figure out the rest of these. The power rule says this: if you have a to the m raised to the n power, that's equal to a to the m times n. That is to say, you multiply your exponents. So right here, what do we have? We have x to the fourth to the 1/2 power. This is going to be equal to x to the fourth times 1/2. 4 times 1/2 is 2, so this is x squared. Let's do the same thing with y. We have y to the sixth to the 1/2 power. That's equal to y to the sixth times 1/2, which is y to the third. All right, so just like that, using the power rule, we were able to simplify this to be 9x squared, y to the third, which is answer choice A. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says, which of the following expressions is equivalent to 92x squared plus x minus 1 plus xy plus 2x to the third over x? So everything in this expression looks normal up until we get to 2x to the third over x. There has to be something we can do to this to make it look like the other variables in our expression. And you should recall that one of the laws of exponents, notably the quotient rule, says if you have a to the m over a to the n, that's equal to a to the m minus n. Let's disregard this 2 for a second. We have x to the third over x. X is technically raised to the first power here. So according to the quotient rule, this becomes x to the 3 minus 1 or x squared. So in other words, I can rewrite 2x to the third over x to be 2x squared, and I'm going to replace that up here. This is equivalent to 2x squared. All right, so let me copy down the new expression. We have 92x squared plus x minus 1 plus xy plus 2x squared. So we're going to look through this expression and combine like terms. Again, like terms have the same letter variables raised to the same power. So in 92x squared, our letter variable x is raised to the second power. Here we have the letter variable x raised to the second power. 92x squared plus 2x squared is going to be 94x squared. So we're going to cross those out now that we've combined them. And typically, you write these expressions in highest order first. So x squared is going to come first. Next, we're going to include x. Again, there's no corresponding like term with x, so we'll just copy that down as is. Then x, y. Again, there's no corresponding like term, so just copy it down. And then minus 1. No corresponding like term, so copy it down, cross it out. So the equivalent expression is a 94x squared plus xy minus 1. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says simplify 6x over 11 divided by 2 over 5y. So on the actual ASVAB and PiCAT, you will have scratch paper. It's a good idea to practice writing these problems down. A lot of people make mistakes just copying problems down. Now, what are we doing for this problem? We are dividing two fractions. Whenever you divide two fractions, you follow the algorithm keep, change, flip. You keep this first fraction the same, so we're going to write it down as 6x over 11. You change from division to multiplication, and then you flip this second fraction. So instead of being 2 over 5y, it's going to be 5y over 2. Now, when you multiply two fractions, you multiply straight across. That said, it's always a good idea to try to cross reduce as much as possible. 2 goes into 2 one time, 2 goes into 6 three times. Now that we've cross reduced, let's go ahead and multiply straight across. 11 times 1 is 11. 3x times 5y, well, 3 times 5 is 15, and then we just have x times y. So this one is going to be 15xy over 11, which is answer choice A, of course. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says, which equation of a line contains the point negative 3, 2 and is parallel to y equals negative 2x minus 1? So first of all, this equation of our line is given in slope-intercept form. That is y equals mx plus b, where m is your slope and b is your y-intercept. We can see that the slope is negative 2. Now, parallel lines have slopes that are the same or equal, whereas perpendicular lines have slopes that are negative reciprocals of each other. So let's go through these answer choices and identify our slopes. In A, we can see our slope is negative 2. So this is a possible answer choice. In B, our slope is right here. It's 1. So this is not a possible answer choice. In C, our slope is positive 2. So this isn't a possible answer choice. And ND, our slope is negative 2. So this is another possible answer choice. Now, to find which of these is the correct answer choice, we're going to use this information about the point negative 3, 2 being on the line. If this point is on the line, when we plug it into our equation of a line, it should make a true statement. If it makes a true statement, that point's on the line. If it doesn't make a true statement, then that point is not on the line. Again, this is our x value, this is our y value. So I'm going to plug in 2 for y minus 2 times negative 3 for x minus 4. 2 equals negative 2 times negative 3. A negative times a negative is a positive, so this is 6 minus 4. This is 2 equals 6 minus 4 is 2. Since this made a true statement in this equation here, which is answer choice A, we know that the point negative 3, 2 is on the equation of the line y equals negative 2x minus 4. And as we saw previously, this has a slope that is parallel to this equation of a line. All right, so that is that one. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says factor x squared plus 4x plus 3. So we're trying to factor a quadratic trinomial that has a leading coefficient of 1. So if it's factorable, it's going to look like this, x times x. Now, what we have to do here is find two numbers that multiply to positive 3 and add to positive 4. That's going to be plus 1 and plus 3. Again, 1 times 3 is 3. 1 plus 3 is 4. So this one is going to be B. Now, if you want to check your work, you can simply multiply this out using the FOIL method. That is to say, you can take this x, multiply it here and here, take this 1 and multiply it here and here. X times x is x squared. X times 3 is 3x. 1 times x is x. 1 times 3 is 3. This becomes x squared. 3x plus x is 4x plus 3. All right, so that does match the equation or the expression we were asked to factor. So we know that we did factor it correctly. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says which number is prime. So here are the prime numbers from 1 to 100. As you can see, 1 is never considered prime. And we can see that 2 is prime. Well, how do we know that 2 is prime? A number is considered prime if it's only divisible by 1 in itself. So 2 only has two factors, notably 2 and 1, that is 1 in itself. But that said, how do we quickly know that 57 and 87 are divisible by something other than 1 in itself? Well, you have to know your divisibility rules. The divisibility rule for 2 says if the last digit in the number is even, then that number is divisible by 2 and can't be prime. Both of these end in 7, which is odd, so we can't use this divisibility rule. The divisibility rule for 5 says if the last digit ends in 0 or 5, then that number is divisible by 5 and can't be prime. These are both 7. And the divisibility rule for 3 says sum the digits. If the sum of the digits is divisible by 3, then the number itself is divisible by 3. So for example, here we have 5 and 7. Our digits are 5 and 7. When we add those up, we get 12. Is 12 divisible by 3? It is. 12 divided by 3 is 4. Since the sum of the digits in 57 is divisible by 3. I know 57 is divisible by 3. What about 87? Again, sum the digits. Our digits are 8 and 7. 8 and 7 is 15. Is 15 divisible by 3? It is. 15 divided by 3 is 5. Since the sum of the digits is divisible by 3, I know 87 is also divisible by 3 and therefore cannot be prime. All right, so that is that one. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says if a equals 5 over 2, then 1 over a equals. So again, a is 5 over 2 according to the problem, and we want to know what 1 over a is. Well, what are we going to do? We're going to take 5 over 2 and plug it in for a. This becomes 1 over 5 over 2. What is this? We're dividing a whole number by a fraction. So what are we going to do? We're going to follow the algorithm keep, change, flip. We're going to keep this top number the same. So this equals 1. We're going to change from division here to multiplication. And then we're going to flip this bottom fraction here. So instead of 5 over 2, it's going to be 2 over 5. 1 times any number is that number itself. So 1 times 2 over 5 is just 2 over 5. So we can see that 1 over a is c, 2 over 5. By the way, this is how you find the reciprocal of a number, 1 over a. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says, what is the reciprocal of 15 and 1/3? So the first thing we have to do is convert 15 and 1/3 to an improper fraction. And the way we do that is by doing 15 times 3, which is 45, plus 1, which is 46. So the improper fraction is 46 over 3. To find the reciprocal of 46 over 3, we just exchange our numerator and denominator. So that's going to be 3 over 46. We can't reduce this since 3 and 46 don't have a common factor. So this one is B, 3 over 46. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says, what is the slope of the equation of the line 2x minus 3y equals 6. So more often than not, we deal with equations of lines and slope intercept form, that is y equals mx plus b, and m is our slope. So in this case, what we have to do to quickly identify our slope is to rewrite this equation of the line to mere slope intercept form. So the first thing I'm going to do is subtract 2x from both sides. This crosses out, leaving me with negative 3y equals negative 2x plus 6. And then again, we want to get y by itself, so we're going to divide everything by negative 3 next. This crosses out here, leaving you with y over here. A negative divided by a negative is going to be a positive, so this is 2/3 x. Positive divided by a negative is going to be a negative. Positive 6 divided by negative 3 is negative 2. So this is the equivalent equation of this line here, and we can see our slope is right here. This is our m, and it is positive 2/3. So this one is going to be B. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says which of the following pairs of numbers represent a perfect square and its square root. So in other words, this first number has to be a perfect square, and this second number has to be the square root of that perfect square. As I've said time and time again in my videos, you should really spend time learning the perfect squares from 1 to 20. All of those are listed right here, and their corresponding square roots are over here. So let's go through these. Is 16 a perfect square? You can see it's right here. Again, 4 squared equals 16. But what is the square root of 16? We can see that the corresponding square root is 4. So the square root of 16 is 4, not the square root of 8. Therefore, those are not a pair. Is 25 a perfect square? It is right here. 5 squared, of course, is 25. What is the square root of 25? The square root of 25 is 5, not the square root of 5. So this is not correct. Is 125 a perfect square? If we look in our perfect squares column, we can see that there is no perfect square that is 125. So this is incorrect. By process of elimination, we know D is correct. You can see that 256 is a perfect square. Again, 16 squared, which is equal to 16 times 16 is 256. And what is the corresponding square root of 256? The square root of 256, as you can see from this chart, and as you should commit to memory, is 16. So D is the correct answer. 256 is a perfect square, specifically 16 squared is 256. The square root of 256, of course, is 16. So that is that one. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says, what is the value of y in the following system of equations? We have 2y minus 3x equals 1 and x minus 4y equals negative 17. So when you solve system of equations, you have two options. You can use the substitution method or you can use the elimination method. In this case, I'm going to use the elimination method. But before I do anything else, I'm going to rewrite this first equation such that it starts with negative 3. So I'm just going to move that over there. This becomes negative 3x plus 2y equals 1. And our second equation is x minus 4y equals negative 17. Now, the elimination method says this: multiply either one or both of your equations by a constant such that when you add those two equations together, one of the letter variables is eliminated. In this case, we want to know the value of y, so we want to eliminate the x letter variable. So I'm going to multiply this second equation by a constant of 3. 3 times x is 3x. Negative 3x plus 3x gets eliminated. And you have to come up with this on your own. That's the hardest part of this question. So let's copy down this first equation. And let's go ahead and take this 3 and distribute it here, here, and finally here. 3 times x is 3x. 3 times negative 4y is negative 12y. And 3 times negative 17 is going to be negative 51. If you couldn't do that mentally, you could always do it off to the side. We have negative 17 times 3. Again, a negative times a positive is going to be a negative. 7 times 3 is 21, carry a 2. 1 times 3 is 3 plus 2 is 5. All right, so now we're at the part where we're going to eliminate a letter variable. Negative 3x plus 3x is 0, so this is eliminated. 2y plus negative 12y is negative 10y. And then we have 1 plus negative 51, which is negative 50. Again, we're solving for a y, so we're going to divide both sides of this equation by negative 10 now to get y by itself. This crosses out. Negative divided by negative is a positive. 50 divided by 10 is 5. So we can see y in this case is simply going to be D5. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says the angles of a triangle are in the ratio 3 to 4 to 5. What is the measure of the smallest angle? So for this one, you have to know that triangles always have 3 angles, and those 3 angles always add up to 180 degrees. Since our angles have a ratio of 3 to 4 to 5, I can rewrite angle 1 as 3x, angle 2 as 4x, and angle 3 as 5x. And of course, these equal 180. So I can solve for x, and then by multiplying x by 3x, I'll know that measure of angle 1 here. 3x plus 4x plus 5x is going to be 12x equals 180. Divide both sides by 12 now. This crosses out, leaving you with x on this side. You should notice that 18 and 12, or 180 and 12 have a common factor of 6. So if you can't do this one mentally, reduce it. 18 divided by 6 is 3. Therefore, 180 divided by 6 is going to be 30. 12 divided by 6 is 2. 30 divided by 2 is 15. So we know angle 1 is the smallest angle, and x is 15 degrees. So angle 1 is 3x. 3 times 15 is 45. The smallest angle in this triangle is C, 45 degrees. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says the slope of the line shown is. So because this line is rising as it goes from left to right, we know our slope is going to be a positive value. Therefore, A and B are wrong, and we can say that right off the bat. Now, in order to calculate slope, again, slope is calculated using the formula M. M refers to slope equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Well, where do we get these values from? We get them from the ordered pairs on the line. So I'm going to pick some easy values here. What is this point on the line? That is going to be 0, -2. And what is this point on the line? That is 5, 0. Again, ordered pairs come in x, y. So I can say that this point is x1, y1. That makes this point x2, y2. And now all you have to do to calculate slope is plug in those values. What is y2? It's 0. What is y1? It's -2. What is x2? X2 is right here, it's 5. And what is x1? X1 is right here, it's 0. Let's work this out. 0 minus -2, minus minus becomes plus, so this is 2. 5 minus 0 is 5. So the slope of this line is 2 over 5c. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says the slope of the line shown is. So what is slope? Algebraically, we say slope is represented with the letter variable m. It's rise over run. That is how far you have to move vertically and horizontally to get from point to point on the line. And algebraically, that's y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. You absolutely have to know this formula for the ASVAB. And in fact, if you got the values of these ordered pairs, you can plug them into this formula and calculate slope. Of course, that can be a little bit tedious. So in this video, I want to use the fact that slope is rise over run to quickly solve this one. Again, since the graph decreases as we move from left to right, we know our slope's going to be negative. All the answer choices are negative, so that really doesn't help us. But again, rise over run refers to the vertical movement it takes to get from point to point, as well as the horizontal movement it takes to get from point to point. So let's start with rise. Again, that's a vertical movement. So how far are we going to have to move vertically to get parallel with this point? That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We had to move 6 spaces downward, which is -6. And then we moved 1, 2 spaces to the right, that's positive 2 spaces, to finally get from this point to this point on the graph. -6 over 2 is going to be -3. So we can say our slope is C, -3. This math knowledge practice test question says how many minutes are there in 1 week? So for this one, you have to know that there are 7 days in 1 week, and there are 24 hours in 1 day. So if there are 7 days in a week and 24 hours in a day, there are 24 times 7 hours in a week. 4 times 7 is 28. Bring down an 8, carry a 2. 7 times 2 is 14, plus 2 is 16. So there are 168 hours in a week. What else do you need to know to convert this to minutes? You have to know that there are 60 minutes in every hour. So if there are 168 hours in a week, there are 168 times 60 minutes in a week. Zero times these three is going to give you three zeros. Before we start multiplication with the six, we have to add a zero placeholder. 6 times 8 is going to be 48, carry a 4. 6 times 6 is 36, plus 4 is 40, carry a 4. 6 times 1 is 6, plus 4 is 10. Add this together. This is going to be 10,080 minutes in a 7-day week, since there are 24 hours in a day, 168 hours in a week, and 60 minutes in an hour. So this one is A. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says if the diameter of a circle is 57.3 centimeters, what is its diameter in meters? So we have a circle with a diameter of 57.3 centimeters, and we want to convert that to be in terms of meters. Well, this is a part of the metric system. And the good thing about the metric system, as you can see, is you either divide by 10, 100, or 1,000, or multiply by 1,000, 100, or 10 accordingly. In this case, we're going from centimeters to meters. So you can see we're going to take the number that we're given and we're going to divide it by 100. Well, why is this math so easy? Whenever you take a number that has a decimal and you multiply or divide it by a power of 10, such as 10, 100, or 1,000, you just take that decimal and you either shift it left or right according to how many zeros there are in that power of 10. In 100, there are two zeros, and we're doing division. So I'm going to take this decimal and 57.3. I'm going to move it to the left two times to make this 0.573. Of course, that's meters now that we've converted this. So this one is B. Again, you should know these common conversions for the metric unit. All you're really doing is taking your decimal place and moving it left or right, either once, twice, or three times accordingly. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says the diameter of a circle measures 57.3 centimeters. What is the diameter of the circle in meters? So this is not a geometry problem. Instead, it's a conversion problem where we have to convert from centimeters to meters. That is to say, we're converting between metric units. This is something that you have to know for the ASVAB and PiCAT, since you're not given a reference sheet or a calculator on test day. And I included this chart for reference. Converting between metric units is actually very simple because they tell you exactly what to do. First of all, you have to understand that to go from a bigger unit to a smaller unit, such as kilometers to meters, you're always going to be multiplying. From meters to centimeters, you multiply. From centimeters to millimeters, you multiply. Likewise, to go from a smaller unit to a bigger unit, you're going to divide accordingly. That said, these units tell you exactly what to do. Kilo means 1,000. So to go from kilometers to meters, you multiply by 1,000. Centi means 100. So to go from meters to centimeters, you multiply by 100, and so on and so forth. So in this case, to go from centimeters to meters, you're going to divide by 100. So that's what we're going to do here. Now, we're not going to work this out like long division because we're dividing by a power of 10. And so that's just going to prompt us to change our decimal here by shifting it either left or right, according to how many zeros there are in the power of 10. In 100, there are two zeros. So that's going to prompt us to take this decimal and move it two times to the left. So there are 0.573 meters and 57.3 centimeters. So the answer to this one is A, 0.573. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says, what is the value of 3x minus 5y when x equals 12 and y equals 4? So we're going to be evaluating the expression 3x minus 5y when x equals 12 according to the problem and y equals 4. So we're going to plug these values in and evaluate this expression accordingly. This becomes 3 times 12 minus 5 times 4. 3 times 12 is 36 minus 5 times 4 is 20. 36 minus 20 is going to be 16. So this one is D16. Again, if you can't do that mentally, there's no shame in doing 36 minus 20 off to the side. Again, 6 minus nothing is 6. 3 minus 2 is 1. All right, so that is that one. Very simple. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says if x equals y, what is the value of 5 plus 10 times x minus y? So we're not given values of x or y, so we're going to come up with our own, and we want to come up with any value that's going to be easy to work with. So I'm going to let x be 1, and if x equals y, that means y is also 1. Again, you could use any value for x and y, it will come out the same. I'm just picking the easiest values to work with in my opinion. So again, we have 5 plus 10 times x minus y. Now that we assign values to x and y, uh, this expression becomes very easy to simplify. Again, let's work this out. This becomes 5 plus 10. What is x? We let x be 1, and we let likewise y be 1. Now, to simplify this expression, we're always going to follow the order of operations, that is PEMDAS. We're going to do what's in parentheses first, exponents if there are any, multiplication and division as they appear from left to right, and addition and subtraction as it appears from left to right. In this case, we have parentheses, so we'll work on those parentheses first. This becomes 5 plus 10. 1 minus 1 is 0. All right, we took care of our parentheses. What do we have left? We have multiplication, 10 times 0 plus 5. So we're going to do multiplication before addition. 10 times 0 is just 0, so this is 5 plus 0. 5 plus nothing is 5. So this one is C5. Again, come up with any values that you want, plug them in and simplify the expression according to the order of operations. And if you do your math correctly, you're going to get the same result. I could let x be 1 million and y be 1 million. This would work out the same way. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says the factors of x squared minus 8xy plus 16y squared are. So this is somewhat of a challenging factoring problem. We're trying to factor x squared minus 8xy plus 16y squared. If we can factor this one, it should look like this. X times x in parentheses. Again, x times x will give us our x squared. Now we're looking for two terms that when we multiply them together will give us positive 16y squared. But when we multiply this whole thing out, will give us negative 8xy. So that's going to be negative 4y and negative 4y. Again, negative 4y times negative 4y, a negative times a negative is positive. That's positive 16y squared. So our answer to this one is, again, we have x minus 4y. It repeats itself twice, so this is going to be x minus 4y squared. The correct answer is D. That said, let's check our work by quickly multiplying this out using the FOIL method. So let's take x and multiply it here and here. Let's take negative 4y and multiply it here and here. If this matches our original equation, we know we did our factoring correctly. X times x is x squared. X times negative 4y is negative 4xy. Negative 4y times x is negative 4xy. And finally, negative 4y times negative 4y is plus 16y squared. Let's reduce this. This is x squared minus 8xy. I simply added negative 4xy and negative 4xy together, plus 16y squared. Does this match our original equation? It does. Therefore, I'm confident that we factored this one correctly, and the correct answer is, in fact, D. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says factor a to the third plus b to the third. So at first glance, this looks like a pretty challenging question. That said, on my website, asvabapp.com, I have a free reference sheet that you can download. And in that reference sheet, there is a page dedicated just to factoring. And in fact, you can see that there's a section for factoring the sum or difference of cubes. In this case, we have the sum of two cubes. So when we factor it, it's going to look like this. The only difference between this in my factoring guide is this is lowercase, this is uppercase. So this is going to be our answer, a plus b times a squared minus ab plus b squared. So this one is C. This is one of those cases where you just have to commit this pattern to memory. There's no real other way to factor this one without consuming a significant amount of your time. So again, check out my free reference sheet. I've had it on my website since 2018. This math knowledge practice test question says the greatest common factor of 24 and 36 is. So for this one, you have to understand the difference between your least common multiple and your greatest common factor. So the way I know the difference is like this. The greatest common factor of two numbers is always going to be smaller than the given two numbers. So I know that our greatest common factor of 24 and 36 is going to be smaller than 24 and 36. So 72 is not a possibility. What are the factors of 24 and 36? Well, 6 goes into both of them and 12 goes into both of them. The greatest or the biggest common factor is 12. Least common multiple. The least common multiple, as I just said, is always going to be bigger than the two numbers. And here's why. This is how you find the least common multiple. Line up those two numbers, 24 and 36, and then you list out their multiples. We have 24, 48, 72. Here we have 36, 72. What common multiple do they have? It's 72. So 72 was their least common multiple. 12 was their greatest common factor. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says if x minus y does not equal 0, then x squared minus y squared over x minus y equals. So we're trying to simplify this expression here. I'm going to start by copying it down. We have the expression x squared minus y squared over x minus y, and we want to simplify this expression. So you have to recognize that in the numerator, we have the difference of two perfect squares. And that's a special case of factoring. And it's this case. Again, the difference of two perfect squares says a squared minus b squared is going to be equal to a plus b times a minus b. So we can actually factor our numerator by following this pattern. So this is going to factor to be x plus y times x minus y. And of course, this is over x minus y. Now we can cross out corresponding values in our numerator and denominator, notably x minus y. And in doing so, that just leaves us with x plus y. So this expression simplifies to a x plus y. You did have to know this special case of factoring to solve this one. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says, find the length of the missing side of the right triangle in the figure below. So in order to find the missing side length in a right triangle, you're always going to use Pythagorean theorem, which says a squared plus b squared equals c squared, where a and b are the legs of the right triangle and c is the hypotenuse. How do you identify the hypotenuse? The hypotenuse is always directly across from the right angle, so c is going to be 10. We know we're going to be solving for a. That means b, of course, is going to be 6. So let's plug these values in and solve accordingly. Again, we're solving for a, so we'll leave that as is. We know b is 6, so this is 6 squared, and c, as I just pointed out, is 10, so this is 10 squared. All right, let's go ahead and work this out. A squared, 6 squared is 6 times 6, which is 36. 10 squared is 10 times 10, which is 100. Let's subtract 36 from both sides to get a squared by itself. This says a squared equals 100 minus 36. If you can't do that mentally, do it off to the side very quickly. We have 100 minus 36. We can't do 0 minus 6, and we can't borrow from this 0, so we're going to borrow from this one. This is going to become 0. This is going to become 10. We're going to borrow one more time. This will become 9. This will become 10. 10 minus 6 is 4. 9 minus 3 is 6. So 100 minus 36, in other words, is 64. Now to get a by itself, again, we're solving for a, not a squared. We're going to take the square root of both sides. In doing so, this crosses out this square, leaving you with just a on this side. The square root of 64, as you should know, is 8. So we can see that A is 8, so this one is going to be C. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says, what is 176.0249 rounded to the nearest hundredth? So let's start by copying this one down. Again, you will have scratch paper on test day. And in this case, we have to locate the hundredths place. If we look down here, you can see this is our tens, this is our hundreds. So here's our tens, here's our hundreds. We're going to be rounding this to. And in order to round it, we're going to look to the number to the right of it. If the number to the right of it is 5 or greater, we round up. If it's below 5, we leave it as is. We can see that the number to the right is 4. So we're going to leave it as is. This is going to become 176.02. So this one is C. ASVAB PiCAT Math Knowledge Practice Test question says the lengths of the sides of a triangle are one-third the lengths of the sides of a similar triangle. If a side of the larger triangle is 21 inches, how long is the corresponding side of the smaller triangle? So let's say this larger triangle side is 21 inches. Again, we know this corresponding side, which means the same side, is one-third of that. So we're going to do 21 times one-third. Again, we're multiplying a whole number by a fraction. So write this whole number as a fraction by placing it over 1. 21 divided by 1 is just 21. Now that we have two fractions that we're multiplying together, we're just going to multiply straight across. 21 times 1 is 21. 1 times 3 is 3. 21 divided by 3 is 7. So this one is C, 7 inches. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says simplify 2x squared plus 5x plus 2 over x plus 1 times x squared minus 1 over x plus 2. So these are called rational expressions. We're multiplying them together. In order to simplify rational expressions, you first factor whatever you can, and then you cross reduce accordingly. So I'm going to rewrite this one like this to make it a little bit easier to see. I can't factor x plus 2, so I'm just going to bring that down. How do I factor x squared minus 1? Well, that's just x plus 1 times x minus 1. We can't factor x plus 1 here, so just bring it down as is. But this 2x squared plus 5x plus 2 is something we can factor using the AC method. We're going to multiply 2, which is A, times 2, which is C. 2 times 2 is 4. We're going to identify B. B is 5. Now we're looking for two numbers that multiply to 4 and add to 5, so that's going to be 1 and 4. 1 times 4 is 4. 1 plus 4 is 5. We're going to take 1 and 4 and rewrite this middle term, and then we're going to factor by grouping. So this is 2x squared. I'm going to put this 4 first, plus 4x plus 1x. 1x is just x plus 2. Now we're going to factor by grouping. From these first two terms, I can factor out a 2x. This leaves me with x plus 2 in parentheses. Now from these next two terms, I want to factor out something that gives me x plus 2 in parentheses. So I'm going to factor out a 1. So this is plus 1 times x plus 2. All right, so our factoring is going to be 2x plus 1. That's one solution times x plus 2. So we just factored that, and we're going to write that up here. We have 2x plus 1 times x plus 2. All right, so now we can cross reduce. We have an x plus 1 here and an x plus 1 here. So we're going to leave a 1 down here to represent that this is divided by 1. Then we have an x plus 2 here and an x plus 2 here. Again, if it's helpful, put that 1 there. 2x plus 1 divided by 1 is just 2x plus 1. And this is times x minus 1 over 1, which is just x minus 1. So this is our solution. Of course, in order to have it match one of these answer choices, we have to multiply it out using the FOIL method. So we're going to multiply 2x here and here, and we're going to multiply 1 here and here. And let's do that very quickly. 2x times x is 2x squared. 2x times negative 1 is negative 2x. 1 times x is just plus x. And then 1 times negative 1 is negative 1. Let's simplify that. This is 2x squared. Negative 2x minus x is minus x. And then we just have negative 1. So this is our answer, 2x squared minus x minus 1. You can see that that is answer choice B. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says solve for x. We have x squared minus x minus 6 equals 0. So this is a quadratic trinomial with a leading coefficient of 1. Therefore, we should be able to factor it, and if we can, it's going to look like this. X times x in parentheses equals 0. Now we're looking for two numbers that multiply to -6 but add to -1. It's going to be -3 and +2. Again, -3 times +2 is -6. -3 plus 2 is -1. Now that we've factored this, we're going to set each of these equal to 0 independently, and then we're going to solve for x. So I'm going to say x minus 3 equals 0. That's going to be one of our solutions, and x plus 2 equals 0. That's going to be our other solution. To get x by itself over here, we just add 3 to both sides. This says x equals 3. To get x by itself over here, we're going to subtract 2 from both sides. This says x equals -2. So our solution is x equals 3 or x equals -2. So this one, as you can see, is going to be B. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says if x is a positive integer, solve x squared plus 6x equals 16. So I'm going to copy this one down as is. We're trying to solve for x. We have x squared plus 6x equaling 16. Again, we're told x has to be a positive integer. So you should recognize that if I subtract 16 from both sides, this becomes x squared plus 6x minus 16, and 16 minus 16 is 0. We have a quadratic trinomial with a leading coefficient of 1, which means if we could factor it, it's going to look like this. Now we can solve for x. We're looking for two numbers that multiply to -16, but add to +6. That's going to be -2 and +8. Again, -2 times +8 is -16. 8 minus 2 is 6. All right, so now we're going to set each of these equal to 0 individually. We have x minus 2 equals 0 and x plus 8 equals 0. Add 2 to both sides to solve for x here. This crosses out. This says x equals 2. Subtract 8 from both sides here. This says x equals -8. What was the stipulation in this question? X has to be a positive integer. This is a negative integer, so our only solution is x equals 2. So this one is A. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says if 12 minus n plus 4 equals 6, then n equals. So we're going to be solving the equation 12 minus n plus 4 equals 6. For n, in other words, we want to get n equal to something by itself. So the first thing I'm going to do, of course, is subtract 4 from both sides. In doing so, this crosses out, leaving me with 12 minus n over here. 6 minus 4 is 2. All right, to get this n by itself, we're now going to subtract 12 from both sides. This crosses out, leaving us with negative n on this side. 2 minus 12 is -10. Now, we're solving for n, not negative n. So, again, if you need to see it, there's technically a -1 in front of n. So we could divide both sides by -1. In doing so, these negatives are going to cross out, leaving us with n over here. -10 divided by -1. Again, a negative divided by a negative is a positive. So -10 divided by -1 is just +10. So this one is A, +10. That said, you always want to check your work. We now know that n equals 10. So we're going to take 10 and we're going to plug it into the original equation and see if it makes a true statement. So this becomes 12 minus 10 plus 4 equals 6. 12 minus 10 is 2 plus 4 equals 6. 2 plus 4 is 6. Does 6 equal 6? It does. And because it does, we're confident that A is the correct answer. This very tricky math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says if -x equals x minus 6, then x equals. So we're trying to solve the equation -x equals x minus 6 for x. In other words, we want to get x equal to something by itself. To solve this one, let's start by subtracting x from both sides. In doing so, this crosses out here, leaving you with -6 on this side. -x minus x is -2x. And again, we want x equal to something by itself. So now we're going to divide both sides by -2. This crosses out, leaving you with x on this side. A negative divided by a negative is going to be a positive. Specifically, -6 divided by -2 is going to be +3. So x in this case is d +3. That said, it's always a good idea to check your work. We know x equals positive 3, so we're going to plug that into the original equation for x and see if this makes a true statement. Again, we know x is 3, so plug it in here and here. This says negative 3 equals 3 minus 6. Negative 3 equals 3 minus 6 is negative 3. Does negative 3 equal negative 3? It does. That is a true statement. Therefore, I'm confident that D is the correct answer. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says, what is 8b minus ab plus 7a? Subtract it from 3a minus 9ab plus b. So in this case, we're subtracting polynomials. Specifically, we're subtracting this polynomial from this polynomial. And what's that look like? It looks like this. 3a minus 9ab plus b. From that, we're subtracting this entire second polynomial, which is 8b minus ab plus 7a. To do this subtraction, we have to take this negative and distribute it here, here, and here. Once we do that, we'll be able to simplify this expression by combining like terms. So this is 3a minus 9ab plus b. Negative times a positive is negative 8b. Negative times a negative is plus ab. And a negative times a positive is negative 7a. Now that we've distributed that negative accordingly, let's go ahead and combine like terms. We have 3a and negative 7a. That's going to be negative 4a. Now that we've combined them, go ahead and cross them out. And then we have negative 9ab and positive 1ab. Negative 9ab plus 1ab is going to be negative 8ab. Cross them out now that we've combined them. Then we have negative b and positive b. Negative 8b plus 1b is going to be negative 7b. So this one is D, negative 4a minus 8ab minus 7b. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says, what is negative 2 plus 9x to the fifth plus 2x to the sixth plus 4x to the fourth, subtracted from 8x to the fourth plus 8x to the sixth plus 3 minus 3x to the fifth? So we're subtracting this polynomial from this entire polynomial. To get this one right, you have to set it up correctly. Again, what if this said 2 and what if this said 5? You would say 5 minus 2. Well, the same thing applies here, and this is how we set this one up. Again, we're subtracting polynomials. So I'm going to copy down 8x to the fourth, and I'm going to write very small here because this is going to involve a lot of writing. We have 8x to the sixth. Again, I'm just copying down this polynomial, plus 3 minus 3x to the fifth. And from that, we're subtracting this whole other polynomial. So we're going to put a subtraction sign, parentheses, and then this whole other polynomial. If you do not put the parentheses and a subtraction sign, you'll get this one wrong. So minus 2 plus 9x to the fifth plus 2x to the sixth plus 4x to the fourth. All right, the next key thing that you have to do here is you have to take this negative and distribute it to all these other terms inside parentheses. So there, and finally there. So let's rewrite this as such. Before we distribute that negative, let's first copy down this first part since it's not going to change. Again, we have 8x to the fourth plus 8x to the sixth plus 3 minus 3x to the fifth. Let's distribute that negative. Negative times a negative is going to be a positive, so this is plus 2. Negative times a positive is going to be a negative, so this is minus 9x to the fifth. Negative times a positive is going to be a negative 2x to the sixth, and a negative times a positive is negative 4x to the fourth. Now, the only other thing we have to do is go through this big expression and simplify it by combining like terms. Let's start with 8x to the fourth. Its corresponding like term is going to have the same letter variable raised to the same power, so x to the fourth here. 8x to the fourth minus 4x to the fourth is going to be 4x to the fourth. Now that we've combined them, go ahead and cross them out. Let's move on. We have 8x to the sixth, again, x to the sixth power. Its corresponding term is right here, negative 2x to the sixth power. 8x to the sixth power minus 2x to the sixth power is going to be plus 6x to the sixth power. Cross them out now that we've combined them. Then we have 3 and 2. 3 plus 2 is 5. Cross them out now that we've combined them. Then we have negative 3x to the fifth and negative 9x to the fifth. Negative 3x to the fifth minus 9x to the fifth is negative 12x to the fifth. Now we're going to rearrange this or rewrite this with the highest powers coming first. We have 6x to the sixth. That's the highest power. Next we have minus 12x to the fifth. Then we have the fourth power plus 4x to the fourth plus finally 5. So again, our answer has plus 5 at the end. Cross these first two out. 6x to the sixth minus 12x to the fifth plus 4x to the fourth plus 5. Correct answer to this one is C. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says which expression represents the volume of a cylinder whose height is equivalent to the length of the radius. So what's a cylinder look like? It has a circular top and bottom that are connected via a tube. How do you find its volume? Well, you really don't have to memorize anything as long as you know how to find the area of a circle. Again, this is a circular face. Its area is pi r squared. And then all we do is multiply that by the height of the cylinder, which is h. All right, so that's how you derive the formula. In this case, we're told that its height is equal to its radius. So in place of h here, we can actually plug in r. This becomes pi r squared times r. Now, using the laws of exponents, notably the product law, we can actually do r squared times r. Again, the product law says a to the m times a to the n is equal to a to the m plus n. That is, you add their exponents. So r squared times r, again, there is no power here, so we assume it's 1, is going to be equal to r to the 2 plus 1, which is r to the third. So this is pi times r to the third, which, as you can see, is answer choice B. Again, you would never square pi for any reason, so those are obviously wrong. All right, so this one is B. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says which expression represents the volume of a cylinder whose height is equal to twice the length of its radius. So let's talk about cylinders in general for a second. What does a cylinder look like? Again, it has a circular top and bottom that are connected to make a tube. How do you find the volume of just a normal cylinder? Its volume is equal to the area of one of its circular faces. So the area of a circle is pi r squared times the height of the cylinder. So that's how you find the volume of a cylinder. You do have to know this formula for the test. But again, if you can find the area of a circle, you can find the volume of a cylinder just by multiplying it by its height. Well, in this case, we're told that the height, h, is equal to twice its radius. So h equals 2r in this case. So what we're going to do is plug in 2r for h. This becomes volume equals pi r squared times 2r. I'm going to take this 2 and I'm going to move it all the way to the front. This becomes 2 pi r squared times r. Now we can actually multiply r squared and r together using one of the laws of exponents, notably the product rule. The product rule says this: if you have a to the m times a to the n, that's equal to a to the m plus n. That is to say, you add their exponents. Technically, this is r to the first power. So we have r squared times r to the first. That's going to look like this: r squared times r to the first is going to be equal to r to the 2 plus 1, which is r to the third. So this is 2 pi r to the third, and we can't simplify this any further. So this one is going to be d 2 pi r to the third. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says, if a pyramid has a square base with each side measuring 6 units and a height of 4 units, what is its volume? So the formula I'm going to use in this case is very simple. It's volume equals 1/3 times length times width times height. In this case, our base is square, so all the sides are going to be equal. In other words, if this side is 6, all these other sides are 6 as well. In other words, its length is going to be equal to its width, which is going to be equal to 6. So let's go ahead and plug these values in. Again, our length and our width are the same, so we'll just plug in 6 for both of those. And our height, according to the problem, is 4. 1/3 times 6 is the same thing as 6 divided by 3, which is 2. So this is 2 times 6 times 4. And you could proceed however you want here. I'm going to do 6 times 4 right here. So this is 2 times 6 times 4 is 24. 2 times 24 is 48. So this one is going to be D, 48 units cubed, and it's cubed because we're talking about volume, not area. If for some reason you didn't know 1/3 times 6 is 2, you could work it off to the side. Make 6 a fraction by placing it over 1. When you multiply fractions, you just multiply straight across. 1 times 6 is 6. 3 times 1 is 3. 6 divided by 3 is 2. So that's how I got that 2 there.
Again, you should be able to do 2 times 24 mentally. That said, if you couldn't, do 24 times 2 off to the side. 4 times 2 is 8, 2 times 2 is 4. All right, so that is that one. You do have to be able to find the volume of a pyramid for the ASVAB and PiCAT. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says find the volume of the sphere in the figure below. Use 3.14 for pi. So if you look on my website, asvabapp.com, you'll see that I have a free reference sheet. And on that reference sheet, there is this formula. I would try to commit it to memory if possible. You can see a problem like this on the actual test. That said, the formula to find the volume of a sphere is very simple to remember. It's 4/3 times pi times your radius raised to the third power. In this case, we can see our radius is 3, so let's go ahead and plug that in and solve accordingly. This becomes 4/3 times pi times 3 to the third power. 3 to the third power is the same thing as 3 times 3 times 3. 3 times 3 is 9 times 3 is 27. So this becomes 4/3 pi times 27. Now I want to simplify this as much as possible. So I can say 3 goes in a 3 one time, 3 goes in a 27 9 times. So this becomes 4 over 1, which is just 4 times pi times 9. 4 times 9 is 36. So this is 36 pi. And again, according to the problem, we're told to let pi be 3.14. So plug that in. Now all we're going to do is uh, 3.14 times 36. Move this decimal one 2 times to the right to make this 314 times 36, albeit with 2 decimals to move back in when we're done. 4 times 6 is 24, carry a 2. 6 times 1 is 6, plus 2 is 8. 6 times 3 is 18. Before we start multiplication with this 3, add a 0 placeholder. 4 times 3 is 12, bring down a 2, carry a 1. 3 times 1 is 3, plus 1 is 4, and 3 times 3 is 9. Let's add all of this up. This is 4. 8 and 2 is 10, carry a 1. 8 and 4 is 12, 13, carry a 1. Uh, 9 plus 1 is 11. Bring our 2 decimals back in. We can see the volume is 113.04. This is going to be inches cubed. So this one is B, of course. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says, what is the volume of a cube with edge lengths of 6 centimeters? Let me say this. If you can find the volume of a rectangular prism, you can find the volume of a cube. And again, on the ASVAB and PiCAT, you do not get a reference sheet, so you have to know both these formulas. The volume of a rectangular prism is simply length times width times height. What is the difference between a prism and a cube? Well, in cubes, all the values are the same. You can see that this is a height, this is a length, and this is a width. So, in other words, the volume of a cube, unlike the volume of a rectangular prism, is simply one of its side lengths cubed. In this case, we know that that value is 6. So this is going to be 6 to the third, which is the same thing as 6 times 6 times 6. And you may want to work this out off to the side so as not to make any mistakes. 6 times 6 is 36. 36 times 6, again, I'm going to work that out to the side so I don't make mistakes. 36 times 6, 6 times 6 is 36. Drop down to 6, carry a 3. 6 times 3 is 18, 19, 20, 21. So the volume of this cube with an edge length of 6 centimeters is 216 centimeters cubed. So this one is C. If you can find the volume of a rectangular prism, you should be able to find the volume of a cube. As I pointed out, instead of length, width, and height being different, they're all equal in a cube. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says simplify 25x to the fourth y to the third z over 5xyz. So in this case, we're simplifying this expression. And in order to do that, we have to know one of the laws of exponents, notably the quotient rule, which says this. If you have a to the m over a to the n, that's equal to a to the m minus n. If the exponent is positive, it goes in the numerator. If it's negative, it goes in the denominator and you make the exponent positive. So let's get started. 25 divided by 5 is 5. Now, XYZ, technically X is raised to the first power, Y is raised to the first power, and Z is also raised to the first power. Generally speaking, if something's raised to the first power, you do not write the 1 there in algebra. So let's get started with X to the fourth over X to the first. Again, we have X to the fourth over X to the first. According to the quotient rule, what are we going to do? We're going to subtract our exponents. This is 4 minus 1. This becomes x to the third. Again, our exponent's positive, so it's going to go up here in our numerator. Let's do our y's now. We have y to the third over y to the first. What does our quotient rule say? It says to subtract your exponents. So this is y to the 3 minus 1, which is y squared. So this is y squared here. Now let's look at our z's. Again, this is not raised to any power, so we assume it's raised to the first power. We have z to the first power over z to the first power. According to the quotient rule, that's going to be z to the 1 minus 1, which is z to the 0. Anything raised to the 0 power is just 1. So we could do times 1 here, but it doesn't make a lot of sense to include that because all of this times 1 is just itself. So we do not have to write that 1 there. You can see our answer is 5x to the third y squared, which is answer choice B, of course. Math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT to simplify this expression. So to do that, you have to know the quotient rule, which says if you have a to the m over a to the n, that's equal to the a to the m minus n. That is to say, you subtract their exponents. If the result's positive, it goes in the numerator. If the result's negative, it goes in the denominator. So I'm going to start simplifying this by breaking this expression apart into two parts, like so. This becomes 9x squared y to the third z over 3yz minus 12xy squared z squared all over 3yz. So the first thing I did is broke this into two separate expressions. Now I'm going to simplify each of these using long division and the quotient rule. 9 divided by 3 is our long division. That's simply 3. There is no x in the denominator, so we're just going to leave it in our numerator. Right here, we have y to the third over y, so y to the third over y. Technically, there's the first power here, so this is y to the third minus 1, or y squared. So this is y squared. And then we have z over z. Z to the first power over z to the first power is equal to z 1 minus 1, z to the 0. Z raised to the 0 power is just 1. So in other words, it just disappears. Subtract it. 12 divided by 3 is 4. Again, there is no x in the denominator, so just copy it down. And then we have y squared over y to the first. That's y to the 2 minus 1, which is just y to the first power, which we're just going to write as y. And then we finally have z squared over z. That's z to the 2 minus 1, which is just z to the first. Z to the first is just z. So we just simplified this one. It's 3x squared y squared minus 4 xyz. So this one is going to be C. Math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says in a standard deck of playing cards, an ace of spades is drawn and not replaced. What is the probability of drawing another ace from the deck? So to answer this one, you have to know that in a standard deck of playing cards, there are 52 of them. And for each card, there's going to be 4 suits. So for an ace, for example, there's an ace of clubs, an ace of spades, an ace of hearts, and an ace of diamonds. And you can see that repeats itself for each of the cards. So to answer this one, we know that we took the ace of spades, drew it, and then got rid of it. And by getting rid of that one card, we went down to 51 cards in the deck. And how many aces are left in the deck? There's 1, 2, 3. So the probability of drawing another ace is 3 over 51. That said, we can reduce this by a common factor of 3. How do I know 51 is divisible by 3? 5 plus 1 is 6. So the sum of 51 is divisible by 3. Therefore, 51 itself is going to be divisible by 3. And you can do the long division off to the side very quickly. 3 goes into 5 one time. 1 times 3 is 3. 5 minus 3 is 2. Bring down this 1. 3 times 7 is 21 with no remainder. So 3 divided by 3 is 1. 51 divided by 3 is 17. Your probability of drawing another ace is C, 1 over 17.